Hello and welcome to India's World. Moscow and Washington seem to be heading for a face-off in Afghanistan. Last December, Moscow initiated a regional dialogue on Afghanistan. It has held 3 meetings of the group, which contains Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, China, India and some Central Asian republics. The US declined an invitation to attend the last meeting, saying that the agenda of the meeting was unclear. The US sees the Russian initiative as a counterweight to its influence in Afghanistan. US President Donald Trump is still in the process of shaping his Afghanistan policy. Last week, he sent his National Security Advisor, General H.R. McMaster, to Kabul, Islamabad and Delhi to take stock of the situation. On Thursday, April 13th, the US dropped its largest non-nuclear bomb in the Nangarhar province of Afghanistan, ostensibly to destroy some caves being used by the Islamic State fighters. This was on the eve of the 3rd multinational meeting on Afghanistan convened by Russia. It also preceded McMaster's visit to the region. As Russia begins to reassert its influence in Afghanistan and the Trump administration is yet to formulate its Afghanistan policy, we ask, what does the Russia-US face-off in Afghanistan mean and what will be its consequences for the region? To discuss this, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He is former Foreign Secretary of India and was India's ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France and Russia. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Katju. He was India's ambassador to Myanmar, Thailand and Afghanistan. And we have with us Ambassador Rakesh Sood. He has been India's ambassador to France, Nepal and Afghanistan. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, let me begin with you. Do you think Afghanistan could once again become a theatre of rivalry between the US and Russia? And do the US objectives and the Russian objectives in Afghanistan differ?
2 things. One, that what happened when the US was supporting the Afghan Mujahideen to dislodge Russia from Afghanistan or Soviet Union from Afghanistan, that situation will not be recreated at all. So that kind of a face-off is out of the question. Number 2, even today, although Russia has taken some initiatives to have this meeting of regional powers excluding the United States, Russia is allowing the northern route to operate. And the supplies are still going through that route to Afghanistan. So it's not as if they have stopped it. They also recognize that the United States has a role to play in containing the Islamic State and these religious extremists, though they have this deep-seated suspicion that the United States may actually once again start manipulating these extremist Islamists, as they did in the case of the Mujahideen and the Taliban, and this time the Islamic State, and use that as an instrument to destabilize Central Asia, and then of course with the spillover effects on Russia. There is an undercurrent of suspicion on that account. However, Russia has until now not taken any serious initiative, political initiative in Afghanistan. In fact, they wanted to stay away from Afghanistan, and the only thing they were concentrating was stopping the drug trafficking from Afghanistan to Russia, because I attended several meetings and I found the Russians totally unfocused on the political aspects, concentrating only on the drug trafficking. Now I think because of the Islamic State and what's happening in the Middle East and this and that, they are beginning to be concerned, and they don't want to be in a situation where they have no assets of any kind on the ground and they are totally excluded from playing a role. Yeah. So this is part of reassessment of Russia. But to answer your question, I don't think that we are heading for a face-off in the sense in which you explained.
All right. Vivek, how credible is the Russian threat perception of the Islamic State in Afghanistan and thinking that they would extend their influence to Central Asia and even Russia? If it is true that a majority of ISIS fighters in Afghanistan are actually ex-Taliban fighters, then if the Russians start supporting the Taliban, and there are reports, unconfirmed reports of course, and coming from America, that the Russians are sharing intelligence to the Taliban, they are even supplying weapons to the Taliban. So isn't there a danger that these Russian-supported Taliban, some of them will then later on again join ISIS, and this would lead to a further deterioration in the Afghan situation?
No, let's not look so far ahead. What you are saying is a possibility, but the more immediate concern is that the Russian initiative is complicating the Afghan situation. And it is adding to the complexities of countries like India. As far as your specific question on the ISIS is concerned, the ISIS threat as of today is nowhere close to the threat posed by the Taliban. The ISIS consists of criminals. Second, Pakistanis, Pakistani Taliban, Afghan Taliban, and there has always been in Kunar and parts of Nangarhar some elements of Salafism, and those elements, Salafi elements, have gravitated towards the ISIS. But the ISIS threat is a contained threat as of
ISIS threat to Afghanistan?
Afghanistan. In Afghanistan.
I'm talking about the threat to Russia.
No, it is contained in Afghanistan, and if it is a contained threat in Afghanistan itself, then from Afghanistan it to spread to the Central Asian states and Russia is a stretch.
Okay.
It is, so that is what I meant, that as of now it doesn't pose a threat to the Russians,
Yeah.
but they are, therefore the only inference that one can draw is that this is part of the international contestation between the Russians and the Americans.
Okay. Rakesh, was the dropping of this so-called mother of all bombs, the largest non-nuclear bomb by US on these caves in Nangarhar, was it purely a military act, as America says it is, to get rid of the ISIS fighters using these caves, or was it more a political act, signaling US intention in the region, especially to the Russians?
It was both, and coming on the heels of the Tomahawk missile strike in Syria, it was clearly intended to convey that the US is quite willing to adopt a more robust, a more aggressive foreign policy. But to add to what Vivek said, the Russia-US rivalry actually began in Europe, and we've seen it manifested in Syria. So, in a sense, the rivalry in Afghanistan is a fallout. And secondly, it is quite clear from people who follow the IS, Islamic State, very closely, that the second language in the IS is Russian. So, which means that the number of people from Central Asian countries who also speak Russian, as well as from Russian enclaves, is growing in IS.
Chechen rebels.
Chechen rebels and so on. So, once they are squeezed in Syria, once the attack on Raqqa begins, and they're not going, all of them are not going to be killed, then the possibility of their gravitating to another ungoverned region, as it were, increases, and that ungoverned region could be on the border of Central Asia.
Okay. We've got only 1 minute left in this segment, so a short answer from you, Ambassador Sibal. Could the Russian initiative on Afghanistan be seen as a response to the US-led and now failed quadrilateral coordination group which excluded Russia, because it just had Afghanistan, US, China and Pakistan?
Yes, I mean theoretically yes. Russia feels that the concerned regional powers can get together and see what could be the kind of solution that could emerge in terms of a cooperative effort. But this is not going to succeed if the other quadrilateral initiative didn't succeed. And mind you, the most important player in Afghanistan today is the United States of America. The only country that has troops on the ground is the United States of America. The only country that have assets on the ground and has actually started increasing its interventions militarily in Afghanistan, also with this bomb, is the United States. You just cannot exclude the US factor. So this is a diplomatic play that is going on, but there is no way that a solution can be found by the other countries without the United States of America joining it.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the consequences of US-Russia competition for influence in Afghanistan. Vivek, in what way could the Afghan peace initiative by Russia undermine NATO and US efforts in Afghanistan? Or do you think it will supplement their efforts?
I don't see it supplementing the efforts. The essential NATO effort at the moment is to keep the pressure on the Taliban so that the security situation improves, and also hoping, and to my mind it's a fond hope, to get the Taliban into the political process, which means really talking to the Kabul authorities. Now, if these reports are correct that Russia is helping, materially helping the Taliban or some groups of the Taliban, and Afghan sources, very high level sources, maintain that these reports are true, then Russian help to the Taliban can only complicate situations, and finally, a principal player in Afghanistan is Pakistan. And it helps the Pakistanis to keep the pot boiling.
Let me take this question to Rakesh. In opening a channel to Taliban, Rakesh, might not Russia also feel the need to get closer to Pakistan, thus giving Pakistan an opening to reduce its international marginalization because of its support for Taliban?
I don't think Pakistan is marginalized, but yes, Russia has certainly improved its relations with Pakistan, and there is more than one signal to that effect. We saw the sales of helicopters, we saw the exercises that took place, we see greater interaction between Russian and Pakistani militaries and so on. But I think that today, it began with the Doha office of the Taliban, that peace initiative, which was led by the Germans and so on. That didn't go very far. Then we saw the beginning of Quad and bringing in of China. That didn't go very far either. And meanwhile, we saw the disenchantment on the part of Ashraf Ghani. Also, I think Russia is looking at it partly because Russia sees the current setup in Kabul, which is President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, the national unity government. Russia sees that as a very US-oriented system. And so Russia is also looking at it in terms of encouraging the former President Hamid Karzai, who has now been, I think in the last 7-8 months, who's been 3 times to Moscow, and each time he has had very good audiences and given a big platform from which to speak. So there is that element, but as Vivek has said, other than muddying the waters today, I don't see it actually being able to contribute to any kind of reconciliation.
Now, do you think they're just muddying the waters, or do you think that Russia wants to replicate its success of regional collaboration in Syria, where it coordinated with Iran and Turkey? And here also they've brought in Iran, they brought in China, India, Central Asian republics.
They don't have the same assets on the ground as they have in Syria. In Syria, they are committed to the security of the Assad regime. They have a military base. They have people on the ground. They have very advanced weaponry on the ground. They are playing a very critical role, political, military, diplomatic, security role in Syria. And of course, the ISIS they see as a big threat to them for the reason that was earlier mentioned. They've actually quoted a figure about 5,000 Chechen fighters who are there, and they're worried that if they went to Afghanistan, and that's correct, that they may start using that as a base to destabilize Central Asia, and then of course with this effect on Russia's own security. So the thing is that what I understand from talking to the Russians is that they believe that this government in Kabul is not going to last. They also think that the Americans, now I don't know if they have started recalculating after this Nangarhar bombing, that the Americans are going to withdraw and this government is going to collapse and there will be chaos in Afghanistan. They therefore must reach out to the future players in Afghanistan, and they do think that Taliban is an entity that they must have some connection with. Number two, the public opinion on the ground in Russia actually makes the point that when the Taliban were in power, they stopped this drug cultivation. And now with these new dispensations after that, the drug trafficking has increased manifold with all its negative effects on Russia.
But don't they see the logic of that? Once you control the coffers, you don't need to sell drugs to make money.
No.
And once you're not controlling the state, you need to grow more opium to make money.
Their argument is that actually it's a bit of a conspiracy. Just like drug trafficking across the Punjab from Pakistan side, a very debilitating effect on us and in Punjab itself. So this is what they feel, that's a highly debilitating effect on their society. I mean, it's just a point that at least Taliban stopped this wretched thing from their point of view. So that creates a bit of a, you might call it sympathy or understanding that Taliban also has some positive aspects, but they do understand, they're not fools, that the Taliban ideology is a dangerous one. It's just another facet of the Islamic State. They understand that.
But just as the Mujahideen paved the way for the Taliban in Afghanistan, might not the Taliban in Afghanistan pave the way for a more extremist ideology?
No, I don't think the ISIS ideology will be attractive in Afghanistan. This is the kind of Salafism which the ISIS represents has been very marginal in Afghanistan. The Taliban process has been a long process because of the theologically because of the Deobandi connections. But on the drugs thing, I think the Russians know full well that this myth that the Taliban controlled the drugs, the cultivation of opium poppy during their tenure is wrong. The experts know it because only 1 year that they controlled it, and that was because the drug stocks, the opium stocks were very high, and that was a market correction that was required. And they enforced that particular thing with the ruthlessness with only that the Taliban under Mullah Omar could. So that's the real problem is there's no problem, permit me to say, in talking to the Taliban. I'm advocating that we also should open up. It doesn't mean support.
We'll come to that in a
But
bit.
the real problem is that Pakistan is greatly strengthened in this because they'll continue with the activities. The Americans, I think, were trying to put some pressure, ineffective as it was. But with the Russians now coming in and giving them a pride of place, the game is different for the Pakistanis.
Now, let's stick to US-Russia for a bit. The US has described the Russian initiative in Afghanistan as unilateral, a unilateral attempt to assert influence in the region. It's a multilateral effort, but they call it unilateral. But they also say it's not constructive at this point. But most importantly, they also add that we do plan to work with Russia and other key regional stakeholders to enhance dialogue between the Afghan government and the Taliban. What does that mean? That if the multilateral initiative is ours, then it is fine. Russians are welcome to join. If it is a Russian initiative or anybody else's, then we don't want to be part of it. What does it mean?
Well, I think you have to look a little deeper because even the December meeting that you referred to, Bharat, was actually the third meeting. There had been 2 meetings prior to that which were much more low-key. The December meeting created, because it was at a higher level, created much more controversy because on the face of it, Russia, China and Pakistan, all 3 of them said that an Afghan peace process should be Afghan-led. And yet the December meeting, which was the third, had excluded even Afghanistan from the talks. And I think that's where the Russians then woke up and did a course correction in February. However, the US position has also to be seen in the context of the fact that, as Ambassador Sibal said, the US is the one that has boots on the ground. And so when General Nicholson says that we are in a stalemate, and obviously a stalemate does not help the external forces in Afghanistan, so he talks of changing the stalemate into a positive direction and using that time period to strengthen the Afghan forces. Now, it is in that context that you have to see a possible US or a Western effort at peace and reconciliation when militarily they are better off than being in what they call a negative stalemate.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break again at this point. Stay with us. We'll be back in a bit. Welcome back. We're discussing the consequences of US-Russia competition for influence in Afghanistan. Mr. Sibal, it is one thing to send more US troops to Afghanistan. There is talk in America that there's need to send more troops, but there's no indication that more troops would be sent. But the Taliban get sanctuary in Pakistan, the factor that Vivek has been pointing to. Now, what is the US willing to do to end Taliban sanctuaries in Pakistan? Is it willing to go there, and destroy them? Because unless these sanctuaries are destroyed, the Taliban will keep thriving. You can kill as many as you like in Afghanistan. The madrasas will produce more and shove them into Afghanistan.
Well, this is true. And I recall when I was in Moscow, I was told by the Russians that at the highest levels, they told the Americans that you will never be able to solve the Afghan problem unless you first address the problem of safe havens in Pakistan. And this is what they had learned from their own experience in Afghanistan. So this is nothing new. This dilemma is nothing new. It's going on for decades.
How will the US resolve it?
They are unable to resolve it, and they're not shown the necessary clarity of thinking and policy in terms of dealing with Pakistan and on this sanctuary that they gave. What more did they need in terms of Pakistan complicity in all this? Leave aside everything else, what they know themselves about Pakistan complicity with the Mujahideen and this and that. They know the whole history. They were involved in it. When they found Osama bin Laden having been given sanctuary in what they call is the West Point of Pakistan. So it's not as if they don't have any understanding of the issue, but if you look at the last testimony which the CENTCOM chief gave to the Congress, is very clear. He was very moderate on the Haqqani group, as if they're appealing to Pakistan that please do something about the Haqqani group. But we appreciate that you are now cooperating more with Afghanistan on the frontier and that you are trying to take steps on the ground to stop the flow of terrorists and this and that and that. And Pakistan is very important for us and we'll continue to engage Pakistan. And now they've given them, they've maintained the level of their economic and military aid. In fact, they've increased it marginally. So there's a tremendous confusion in US policy, and that is not at all in our interest, frankly.
So Vivek, what is the commitment that US NSA, General McMaster, wants from India, from whatever little we know in the public domain and whatever you might know from your sources? And how is it different from our earlier commitments to the Afghan government?
Look, it's different in the sense that the Modi government has shown a greater willingness to meet Afghan requests for lethal supplies. The supply of combat helicopters illustrated that point. But I don't see McMaster making demands or requests of us which are different from those made by the Obama administration as of now, which is greater involvement in Afghanistan. I do not...
What does that involvement mean? Does it mean increasing your developmental aid? Does it mean increasing your military aid? Does it mean, underwriting the expenses of the Afghan National Army? What does it mean?
No, I don't think they expect that India will underwrite those expenses because they know that we are not in a position to do so. But yes, continue with your military assistance as and when the Afghans make a request. And two, continue with your developmental assistance, which in any case we ought to, because our development programs have been outstandingly successful in Afghanistan. So as of now, the American policy, as you rightly said, is still unfolding, and we really don't know what shape it will take. But what was most interesting in McMaster's thing, that from Kabul he launched a fairly vicious attack on the Pakistanis. When it came to Islamabad, he was very discreet. When it came to Delhi, then he said nothing publicly.
So progressive dilution.
So the progressive dilution, which only indicates that they are still not willing to get into Pakistan to clean up this mess, and the Faustian bargain that they struck with the Pakistanis right in 2001, those shades still continue.
Rakesh, if US wants nothing more from India than what India was already doing, so was McMaster's visit just a ceremonial visit? He just came to pay his respects to the Prime Minister of India, introduce himself to the NSA and go back? Or do you think he would have made some argument about the nature of security assistance that India is offering? And what kind of security assistance? How can it be different from what it already is? And what are the red lines that India must not cross so that it doesn't get entangled in the war in Afghanistan?
Well, I think McMaster's visit was more than just Afghanistan, because we have many more issues at that level which would be discussed. Certainly China would have been discussed, certainly Asia Pacific, North Korea, etc. And also what is happening in Syria. And Afghanistan is only one of them. As I think was said earlier by Vivek, I think what has happened is that we have indicated a greater readiness to provide actual training. We also know that the most effective element of the Afghan National Security Forces is actually their special forces. Now, their special forces today are very small. There are about 17,000 special forces. They are the ones who have been most successful in fighting the Taliban insurgency. And there is a greater need to train these elements much more rapidly. It is quite possible that we may get involved in training of some of these special forces. Their equipment, of course, comes from US, but their training and their ramping up the special forces is something which is very critical.
Okay. Now we are really running out of time. So my last question, and all of you, if you could just answer it in 1 or 2 sentences. Should India be talking to Taliban, as Vivek has suggested? And if we should be talking to Taliban, what should we be talking to them about?
Publicly, certainly not, because it will send a terrible message that we are, in a sense, accepting this ideology. And we know the past history of Taliban towards us, the IC 814, and of course the Pakistan connection, and we'll be given more comfort to Pakistan. But if our intelligence agencies have established contacts with them, that is part of their job, and I won't be opposed to that.
Okay, Rakesh?
No, I agree completely. I think today we know that there are multiple factions within the Taliban. But the other thing that I would say is that whatever we do vis-a-vis the Taliban in terms of discrete contacts at the level behind the scenes, as it were, I think it should be done taking the Afghan government into confidence. We shouldn't try and do the kind of thing that the Russians did or others did.
Last word to you.
Well, I think intelligence contacts, yes, but my experience of Afghanistan shows me that everyone there talks to everyone all the time, and in order to be a player, we should not be reluctant, and the Afghan government itself has contacts, so why should they complain if others have contacts?
No, if you have contacts with their knowledge, that is the issue.
Yeah.
No, you can always keep briefing them. That's part of the diplomatic game. I mean, that's part of the diplomatic game.
Okay, all right.
So Iran has contacts with them.
Yes, everyone has contacts
Although
with
they
them.
are
Why should
Sunni extremists.
Yes, we deny ourselves to become a player.
All right, we've really come to the end of this discussion. I'd like to thank Ambassadors Rakesh, Sood, Vivek, Katju and Kanwal, Sibal for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.